I was kicked out at 16 because of my twin sister's pregnancy. Now, years later, they want to move in with me. I always knew I wasn't wanted. And I don't mean in the oops, you were an accident kind of way. My parents actually told me that they wished they only had one child, my twin sister. They admitted I was just an extra. They never asked for. Pretty harsh, right? Growing up, it felt like I was living in someone else's family. My sister, let's call her Sarah, was the star. She was everything they ever wanted, and they made sure she knew it. She had her own bright decorated room, with pink curtains, a Disney bedspread and shelves packed with toys. She was treated like royalty. Meanwhile, I was tucked away in a tiny space, with an old squeaky bed, and a dresser that looked decades old. Every morning reminded me of the difference. I'd hear my parents planning new clothes for Sarah, or talking about her gymnastics classes, while I was left to figure out my day alone. If they did notice me, it was only to say, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" It almost felt like that was my actual name. School wasn't any better. I remember one parent-teacher conference, where my parents spent the whole meeting praising Sarah's finger paintings, as if she were the next Picasso. When the teacher handed them my report card, they didn't even glance at it. I was working hard, hoping good grades would earn me some attention, but it never did. Sarah was the golden child, and I was just background. She always had the best clothes, the attention. Even first pick at dinner, her closet was filled with brand new outfits every season. My wardrobe was hand-me-downs from cousins I didn't know, some older than me. On Christmas or birthdays, she'd be buried in gifts while I got one or two things, just enough for them to say they hadn't forgotten me. I'd fake a smile, but deep down it hurt. And it wasn't just the material stuff. It was the way little things reminded me I didn't matter. If I touched one of Sarah's toys, she'd scream, and my parents would rush to her defense, scolding me for being careless. At meals, she always got the biggest slice of pizza or the best cut of chicken. I got leftovers. If I complained, my mom would snap, "Be grateful you're getting anything at all." The only person who ever made me feel seen was my grandfather. He treated me like I mattered. On weekends, he'd take me fishing or sit with me on the porch, telling stories from his own childhood. For a few hours, I felt like a normal kid, not just the unwanted twin. But then he got sick. Cancer. My parents even managed to shut me out of that. They'd take Sarah to visit him, give her flowers for him, but I was told to stay home, supposedly to help around the house, which was just an excuse. I started sneaking out to visit him myself. He'd tell me how proud he was of me for hanging on, but I could tell he worried about what would happen to me. When he died, it felt like the only good thing in my life had been taken away. My parents never asked if I was okay. They were too focused on Sarah's grief, as if she was the only one who'd lost someone. At the funeral, she stood up front with them, while I was pushed to the back, like they didn't even want to be seen with me. After that, things got worse. Any little scraps of attention I used to get disappeared. At dinner, my parents spoke only to Sarah, as if I didn't exist. Family photos? My face was usually cut off, or I was just a blur in the background. Looking at our albums, you'd barely know I was part of the family. The resentment built up. I'd try to stand up for myself, like when Sarah got another new dress, and I asked why I never got anything new. My mom brushed me off. "Sarah's got her activities. You're fine with what you have." If I pushed back, I was scolded for being selfish. Eventually I stopped speaking up. I became good at disappearing, blending in so I wouldn't hear those words again. But even staying quiet didn't stop the criticism. My dad especially looked at me like I was a mistake that needed fixing. "Shape up, son. Why can't you be more like your sister?" he'd say. It was clear he believed I was the problem just for existing. And of course Sarah knew how to use that. If she wanted something, she'd turn on the tears, and my parents would rush to her side. Nothing I did could ever measure up. Growing up unwanted messes with your head. You start to think maybe they're right, that you're the problem. I spent years lying awake, wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't just be the son they wanted. I'd wish I could disappear and make life easier for them, because that's how they made me feel like a burden. Looking back now, I see how toxic it all was. But as a kid you don't know better. You just want love and acceptance. And when you don't get it, you blame yourself. By the time I turned 16, I thought, okay, halfway to freedom, just 2 more years, and I can leave. I was counting the days, but I wasn't ready for what came next. Sarah got pregnant at 16. Her boyfriend was 19, barely out of school, working dead-end jobs, with no sense of responsibility. When my parents found out, I thought there'd finally be consequences. But no, they acted like she'd won a prize. They were excited, talking about becoming grandparents, as if this was something to celebrate. They rushed a wedding together so fast, it felt like a record. One day I was in my room, the only safe space I had, and the next I was told to get dressed because my sister was getting married. Nobody asked how I felt. Not that they ever did. A few weeks later, the real blow came. My mom called me downstairs with that fake smile I'd learned to hate. She said that with Sarah's baby on the way, they needed more space. Then she told me they were taking my room, the one place that was actually mine, even if it was small and worn out. I asked, "What about me? Where am I supposed to go?" My mom just shrugged. "You're old enough to figure it out. Be grateful we let you stay this long." I was stunned. I was 16. Where was I supposed to go? But they didn't care. To them, I was expendable. My dad backed her up, saying, "You're a young man now. Time to take responsibility for yourself." As if kicking your teenage son out for a baby was normal. That night, I packed what little I had. Some clothes, books, and a few things my grandfather gave me. Looking around my room one last time, I thought, it's not much, but it was mine. Now it would be a nursery, and I'd be out. I asked them again where I was supposed to go. My dad just said, "You'll figure something out." My mom added, "We're doing this for your sister. She needs us." I wanted to scream, "What about me? When have you ever needed me?" But I knew nothing would change. So I set up an old tent in the backyard. That became my home. The nights were freezing. The ground was hard, but it was all I had. I could hear them inside the house, laughing over dinner, planning for the baby, while I sat outside like some stray dog they didn't want in the house. Then winter came, and things got brutal. I bundled up with everything I owned, but the cold cut through anyway. I used a flashlight to finish homework, because, believe it or not, I was still trying to keep up with school. I'd sit in that tent with 3 layers of clothes, shivering while trying to read my textbooks. My grades started slipping. It's hard to focus on algebra when you're freezing and wondering if you'll even make it through the night. And of course my parents didn't notice. They were too busy redecorating my old room, making everything just right for Sarah's new family. I had become the ghost outside, the one they didn't have to acknowledge anymore. Sometimes I'd look through the kitchen window, watching them eat and laugh like everything was perfect, while I was only a few feet away trying to survive. To get by, I started doing odd jobs, mowing lawns, shoveling snow, anything I could find. I'd knock on doors in the neighborhood, asking if people needed help. Some looked at me like I was begging, but a few gave me work, and I was grateful for every dollar. It wasn't much, but it bought me food. I'd sneak back to my tent with a sandwich or leftovers, pretending I was camping by choice. The hardest part was knowing my grandfather wouldn't have let this happen. If he were alive, he would have taken me in without hesitation. But without him, I had no one. I thought about going to a friend's house, but my parents had already spread their version of the story around town. According to them, I was the troublemaker who couldn't follow rules. They made it sound like I had chosen to live outside, all to protect their perfect family image. One night, lying in the tent with the wind howling outside, I realized I couldn't keep going like that. My parents weren't coming to help me. They never cared. They had pushed me out without hesitation, treating me like extra baggage they didn't want. That's when it hit me. I was done chasing their approval. I was done being the ignored child, the one blamed for everything. If they didn't want me, fine. I'd figure things out on my own. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't staying in that backyard forever, hoping for their acceptance. Still, living in that tent reminded me every day of how isolated I was. Winter nights dragged on endlessly. I kept saving every bit I earned from those small jobs, but it was never enough to make a real change. I'd fall asleep with my hands aching from the cold and my stomach empty, thinking, this can't be my life forever. One day after school, I was walking past a bakery I'd always noticed but never entered. The smell of bread and pastries was stronger than usual, and I was starving. I must have looked rough because the owner, an older man named Frank, came outside and asked if I needed something. I tried to play it off, but he wasn't fooled. He had that no-nonsense way about him, like he'd seen hard times himself. Then he asked, "You looking for work, kid?" Without hesitation, I nodded. This was my chance. He said he needed someone to sweep floors, carry deliveries, and clean up. Nothing fancy, but he'd pay cash and throw in some day-old bread. To me, it felt like winning the lottery. At least I wouldn't go to bed hungry anymore. The first day was tough. The bakery opened before sunrise, so I was up by 4 a.m., walking through the dark streets. But the moment I stepped inside, the warmth hit me, and I thought, yeah, I can do this. Frank gave me the rundown. No slacking, get the work done right. The job was demanding, and my back ached from mopping and lifting heavy flour bags. But I didn't care. For the first time, I had a place to be, and it felt good to be useful. Frank wasn't soft-spoken, but over time, we started talking. He told me how his own father kicked him out, and how he built the bakery from nothing. I think he saw a little of himself in me. He gave me advice about saving money, and even taught me how to make simple pastries. For the first time in years, I felt like someone actually cared. After a few weeks, Frank offered me a small room above the bakery. It was mostly used for storage, but he said I could stay there if I wanted. Compared to the tent, it was a mansion. That night I moved in. The room was tiny, with a single bed and a window that barely opened. But it was warm, and it was mine. I slept better than I had in months. I threw myself into the job, determined to prove I was worth the chance. Frank taught me how to knead dough, bake bread, and even make apple pie. He wasn't big on compliments, but a nod or a grunt when I did something right meant more than I can explain. Then one day after my shift, he handed me an envelope. "You've been doing good work, kid," he said. Inside was my first proper paycheck. More money than I'd ever held at once. It wasn't a fortune, but it made me feel like I was finally moving forward. The bakery became my routine. I'd wake up early, work until afternoon, then head to the library to use free Wi-Fi to look for more opportunities. I knew I couldn't stay there forever, but it was the foundation I needed. I saved every penny, lived frugally, and stretched every meal. Frank and I didn't talk much about my situation, but he knew. One night, he handed me a set of keys, in case you ever need to lock up. He acted like it was nothing, but I knew it was trust. The bakery kept me going, but it wasn't always easy. Watching families come in together stung every time. Seeing parents and kids laughing over pastries reminded me of what I never had. Sometimes I had to step into the back to catch my breath, but I wouldn't let it drag me down. Frank always said, "You either let life beat you or you get up and beat it right back." That became my mantra. Still, I knew Frank was right when he told me not to get too comfortable. I couldn't stay there forever. So I picked up extra shifts at a convenience store and did landscaping on weekends. It was exhausting, but with every paycheck, I felt more in control. I didn't just want to survive. I wanted to build a life where I didn't depend on anyone. Looking back, I realize how lucky I was to find Frank. The bakery wasn't just a job. It was the first real step toward building my future. For the first time, I felt like I had a chance. I wasn't just the unwanted kid in a tent anymore. I was working, saving, and moving forward. One small step at a time. After years of hard work and saving every penny, I finally bought my own house. It wasn't big or fancy, just a small 3-bedroom on the edge of town. But it was mine. Walking through that door for the first time, holding the keys, I felt a rush of pride. I'd done it without any help from the family that abandoned me. The first few weeks, I lived with almost nothing, an air mattress and cardboard boxes for furniture. But I didn't care. Every morning I woke up reminding myself, this was my space. No one could throw me out again. Slowly I started furnishing it. A couch from a thrift store, a cheap dining table. Little by little, each piece made it feel more like a real home. Then one day, just as I was settling in, the doorbell rang. I figured it was a delivery, or maybe a neighbor, but when I opened the door, I froze. There they were, my parents, Sarah, her husband, and their 3 kids, all standing on my porch, smiling like nothing had ever happened, like they hadn't kicked me out and left me to survive on my own. My mom spoke first. "Surprise," she said, as if this were a happy reunion. "We heard you bought a house. We set her so proud of you." I gripped the doorknob, trying to keep my face neutral. Part of me wanted to slam the door, but another part was too stunned to move. I hadn't seen them in years, and suddenly, they were standing in my doorway, pretending like nothing had ever happened. Sarah stepped forward, balancing her baby on her hip, and gave the place a quick once-over as if she was inspecting it. "Nice place, bro. You've done well for yourself," she said. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a friendly visit. They were here with a purpose. My family only ever showed up when they wanted something. My dad cleared his throat, preparing for one of his usual speeches. "Son, with Sarah Sip's family growing, and you having this big house all to yourself, maybe it's Sip's time to let the past go. Family should stay together, right?" I almost laughed out loud. Family? These were the same people who threw me out like garbage when I was a teenager. And now they wanted to talk about family. I swallowed the anger rising inside me and asked directly, "What are you really asking for?" My mom stepped forward, smiling as if she had the solution. "Well, we thought, wouldn't it be nice if we all moved in here? One big happy family, like old times." She said it casually, like she wasn't asking me to give up the one thing I had worked for my entire life. The memories came flooding back. The nights I spent in a tent, being treated like I was nothing, and now they wanted to move into my home? "No," I said firmly. "That set's not happening." Their smiles vanished. My mom Sip's face twisted in disbelief. "But we stir family," she insisted, as if that should have changed everything. "We should help each other." I steadied myself and asked, "Where was that attitude when I was 16, sleeping outside in a tent? Where was family then?" For a moment, silence hung in the air. My dad Sip's face turned red, his chest puffing up like he was about to intimidate me. "Now listen here." "No, you listen." I cut him off. "I built this place without your help. I worked every day to get here, and I'm not letting you waltz in and take it like nothing happened. This is my home, and you said are not welcome." Sarah gave me a fake wounded look. "Come on, don't be selfish. We need the space, and you owe us." That was it. "Owe you," I snapped. "I don't owe you anything. You threw me out with nothing, and now you think you can just show up and take over? Get out." My dad's face darkened even more. For a moment I thought he might explode, but instead he just stared at me, like he was finally realizing I wasn't that scared kid anymore. I wasn't backing down. My mom made one last attempt, her voice soft, almost pleading. "We know we made mistakes, but we just want to be a family again." I shook my head. "You only want to be a family now that I have something you want. That's not how it works." ICEPs moved on, and you need to do the same. They lingered for a few seconds, stunned, before leaving silently. I watched them drive away, feeling a mix of anger, relief, and sadness. For years I had wished they would care, but now that they showed up, I realized I didn't want them in my life anymore. I closed the door, leaning against it as I let out a long breath. My hands were shaking, but for the first time I felt free. I had stood up for myself, and it felt good. Their treatment had defined me for too long, but not anymore. This was my life, my home, and I wasn't letting them take it. I knew it wasn't the end. Toxic people don't just disappear. But I had taken the first step, learning to protect what was mine and say no without guilt. Sitting in my quiet living room, I realized this space was mine. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about living on my own terms. A couple of weeks passed, and I thought it was over. I was wrong. Toxic people always find another way. One afternoon, I came home to an official-looking envelope in the mailbox. My stomach sank as I opened it. A legal notice. Sarah was contesting my ownership of the house, claiming it was family property. I stood in the driveway, staring at the paper in disbelief. They couldn't let me have even this. I hired a lawyer the next day. She was direct and no nonsense. They don't have a case, but they'll try to make it messy, she warned. And she was right. Over the next few weeks, they dragged me through lies, saying I had used their money to buy the house, painting me as ungrateful. Suddenly, distant relatives and family friends started calling, asking why I wouldn't let my parents move in. None of them knew the truth. They only heard my parents' version. It felt like being that abandoned kid all over again. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I gathered receipts, records, proof that I built this life without them. Then I asked my lawyer to dig deeper into family finances. What she found stunned me. When my grandfather, the only person who ever truly cared about me, passed away, he left me an inheritance. A significant one, but my parents had gained control of it and used it for themselves, for debts, Sarah's wedding, even a failed business. They had let me live in a tent while they spent the money that was meant for me. Reading the documents, my hands shook. It was anger, betrayal, and disbelief, all at once. They had stolen years of security from me, used me as nothing more than a source of cash, and now they wanted my home too? That was enough. My lawyer said we had a strong case for fraud and theft. It wouldn't be easy, but the evidence was undeniable. I decided to fight, not just for the money, but for justice. When the lawsuit was filed, my phone lit up with calls and voicemails from my parents and sister, begging to talk. I ignored them. They weren't sorry. They were just scared. The next months were brutal. In court, they tried painting me as an ungrateful son, but every time, my lawyer revealed more proof of what they'd stolen. Watching them squirm under the truth gave me strength. When the verdict came, it was like a weight lifted. The judge ruled in my favor. They had to repay everything, plus damages. Their shocked faces said it all. They couldn't twist their way out this time. Walking out of that courthouse, I finally felt closure. It wasn't about the money. It was about standing up for myself. For the first time, I was free of their control. Since then, they've tried reaching out with apologies, claiming they want to make amends. But I know better. Apologies mean nothing when they come only after consequences. I blocked them all. Now, I focus on moving forward. I have my house, my work, and the life I built myself. The road ahead won't be perfect, but I've learned the most important lesson. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to walk away, even from family. Because family isn't about blood. It's about who stands by you and who doesn't treat you like an afterthought. And one thing is certain, I won't let anyone take away what I've earned. Not anymore.